So, Supergirl just came out. The next chapter in James Gunn's DCU, starring Milly Alcock as Kara Zor-El, adapted from Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow, the 2021 miniseries by Tom King, Bilquis Evely, and Mat Lopes. I was very excited for this movie when it was first announced. I think the original comic is great, especially the amazing art and colors. And while I think that the movie has plenty of faults, especially when viewing it as an adaptation of the comic, on the whole, it's still a solid enough time with a great lead actor in the role that excites me about the character's future in the DCU. There are a lot of strong opinions about this movie. And I mean very strong opinions. It's gotten to the point where the discourse around the movie has overshadowed talking about the movie itself. So today I want to try and cut through the noise a bit and do something completely unexpected. This is a normal review of Supergirl. Really breaking new ground here. On the whole, I think that the movie is okay. It's not outstanding by any means, but in the grand scheme of superhero blockbusters, I think that is perfectly fine. Nowadays, people like to use mid as an insult, but really there's nothing wrong with a movie just being okay. We're very used to hearing, it was fun, it's not that deep, oh, just turn your brain off, it's just a Mario movie, in defense of movies that have no meaning or a purpose. But sometimes a movie is genuinely just a solid time. If you ask me, being a middle-of-the-road movie isn't the end of the world or anything. It has plenty of issues, especially when you put it side by side with Woman of Tomorrow, which I will get to later, but there's still plenty of things to enjoy about it. For starters, Milly Alcock is fantastic as Kara. She has a kind of bite and edge to this version of the character that I really like. She's flawed and messy and rude and sometimes a little bit gross. She's kind of a slob. Her house is filled with trash and dirty laundry. She pisses with the door open. And it's kind of refreshing because we don't normally see women superheroes act like that, despite it being incredibly common for male characters. I think that everything we saw of Krypton and Argo City was great, especially David Krumholtz as Zor-El. He was a huge surprise standout. Who I just found out is Bernard from the Santa Claus movies. That's weird to me. That's crazy. Whoa, good job, dude. Especially because all of his scenes and all the scenes in Argo City were fully in Kryptonese and subtitled. Another standout for me was Jason Momoa as Lobo. He doesn't get a ton of screen time or do a whole lot for the story, honestly, but he's like a fun little spice to the scenes that he's in. My favorite aspect about him was that he was just there. He shows up in the movie and he doesn't get like some big grand reveal or a 10-minute explanation of his whole backstory. He's just a dude who happens to be in the same bar as Kara and she's like, oh shit, it's Lobo. It's been one of my favorite aspects of the DCU so far. These bigger, more like comic book ideas like an immortal bounty hunter or a fifth dimensional imp or a pocket dimension prison or this fucking guy, they're just peppered into the stories and you're sort of expected to just go along with it instead of feeling like they have to be explained or earned. It feels like we're just inside of a greater DC universe, like you're just reading a comic and you don't know what's going on, but the movie trusts the audience enough to just understand it. One thing I haven't seen anybody talk about, but it's a huge highlight for me, was the creature designs. I'm a sucker for what I like to call a little fucker. It's one of my favorite things about the Star Wars franchise. The craft that goes into creating these alien worlds is something that's sorely been missing from sci-fi movies as of late. And this movie is filled to the brim with crazy aliens and monsters, nearly all of them done with incredible practical prosthetics and puppetry. Characters that are basically just background extras that we only see for a second or two are given a ton of attention to detail and personality. Like I really like the guy, like where they're on the bus and Ruthie comes up and she's like, can I sit next to my friend? He's like, oh, you're your friend? Okay, yeah, sure. Like that was funny to me. I like that. There's big aliens, small aliens, Squidward aliens, all the little fuckers you could imagine. Hey, wait, is that Seth Rogen? But despite the things that I liked about the movie, there's plenty of things that I didn't. The color grading is brown and muddy. Every planet looks more or less the same with the exception of Krypton, which is really disappointing when you put it next to the gorgeous art of the comic. And the lighting was especially a problem. We saw it for the first time in IMAX and it looked perfectly fine, but then we saw it again in Dolby, which is still supposed to be like a premium format, and that entire first scene with Krem and Ruthie's family, you couldn't see a single thing that was happening. Like it was on the level of like Netflix Avatar lighting, which is not a good bar. But the biggest sore spot was by far the editing. It feels like a movie that was absolutely destroyed in the edit. Like it's 20 minutes too short. It's missing so much connective tissue and time to fully flesh out so many of its ideas. Like there's that moment at the end where Lobo cuts off this guy's head, which is the kind of violence you've normally, we've gotten away with in PG-13 movies before. And the movie like cuts around it so awkwardly. Like we don't see anything. It's really weird, despite it being like the goal of Lobo for the whole movie, The action isn't really that memorable, with a lot of the choreography and interesting moments cut around in the edit or even just happening off screen. Like so many big Kara moments when she's not depowered, because she's depowered a lot in this movie for some reason. Like a lot of her big moments happen like off screen or like behind a wall or like in sound effects and stuff. It's really weird. I do really like the one on the bus with the teleporter. That was really fun, but especially the final fight is just uninteresting from an action standpoint. Maybe even worse by a baffling needle drop that really just takes you out of it. Like this movie had Blondie all over the marketing. I bought a sweat, like a Blondie Supergirl sweatshirt from Warner Brothers. I didn't even use it. Although just to be clear, I don't think that that's any reason to harass the singer of that cover. From my understanding, she is an indie artist who recorded it in her bedroom like 3 years ago and didn't even know what movie it was for. before, and she's been getting waves of hate for it. If anything, I'd say that the fact that they went through 45 different songs before landing on it shows that the scene shouldn't have even been a needle drop to begin with, more than anything about the song itself. It feels like the movie was cut down, trying to be as short as possible, or in response to test audiences. It seems like both Gunn and Gillespie thought that the movie wasn't working, and so DC just went with the one that tested better with audiences. Which is honestly reasonable, but still disappointing that it was so broken from the beginning. A lot of the criticism that I've seen of this movie has been aimed directly at the script, and specifically screenwriter Ana Nogueira. And before I saw the movie, that really worried me, because according to Gunn and everybody else involved, this movie had such a great script that Nogueira was instantly signed on to not just write Teen Titans, but also a Wonder Woman movie. So if the script was the worst they'd ever seen, like a lot of journalists were saying, that was very concerning. But if you ask me, a lot of this movie's problems have nothing to do with the script. I'd even go so far as to say that there's the bones of a pretty solid script in here, but it's buried under the direction and editing problems that I mentioned earlier, like the 3-day ticking clock for Krypto and tying him to Kara's memory of Krypton and even her mother's funeral, all of the scenes involving Clark and Zor-El. There are some genuinely beautiful and heartbreaking lines in this movie and themes that could have honestly only come from a great writer. Was it as good as everybody was hyping it up to be? I don't know. And you don't know either. Because you haven't read the script. It is a very well-known fact about the movie industry that a good script doesn't always make it through to the final product. A whole heap of things can happen in between turning the script and what you see on screen, like editing and directing decisions, test audience reactions, hell, even just scheduling problems. This might be my hottest take of all time, but I would argue that Black Adam probably had a solid script early in its development because you can see the bones of interesting ideas underneath all the Dwayne Johnsonisms. So it felt weird that Ana Nogueira specifically was getting singled out so heavily in so much of the discourse, from even renowned and experienced film journalists who should know that about making movies. Literally is one of the first things I ever learned. When I was a child, I wrote a short film for a class, and then the director butchered it. He was also a child, and the script wasn't very good, so bear that in mind. But still, my artistic vision. On the topic of Ana Nogueira, her IMDb page doesn't really do her much justice to the average viewer. It makes it seem like Supergirl is her first ever movie. But the reality is that she's been what's called a fixer for years. She's kind of built up a reputation for saving a lot of scripts and going uncredited for it, which is, again, normal in screenwriting. It's the same as Tony Gilroy or even Carrie Fisher and Christopher McQuarrie. The only difference is that they didn't write a Supergirl movie, apparently. With that said, there are some things that Ana has said in interviews about the original Woman of Tomorrow comic that raise a few red flags for me, specifically when it comes to her understanding of the ending and how that might influence future adaptations, and I will get to that. But the vitriol towards her specifically, about literally the one thing we don't see in the movie, compared to the people who are more involved with the actual product, it feels extremely disproportionate. I don't think the script is perfect though, and I'll say a lot of the biggest problems with it come from the fact that this is supposed to be a direct adaptation. Because as an adaptation of Woman of Tomorrow, this is not one. It's just not. I'm gonna start talking spoilers for the comic now, so if you have any interest in reading it, and I very much recommend that you do, this is your warning. Like and subscribe before you click off, and use my Fortnite creator code TroyBoy17. Please and thank you. Now, just for personal context, I read Woman of Tomorrow back when it first came out in 2021, and I loved it, and then I reread it just before the movie to keep it fresh in my mind, and I still think that the comic is outstanding. I don't think of it as some, like, untouchable masterpiece like All-Star Superman or Batman Year One, or even something like Wonder Woman Historia or New Frontier or anything like that, but I know a lot of people do hold it very close to their hearts, and I think that's completely justified. And so because of that, I also think it's 100% valid for diehard fans of this comic to be disappointed with the movie, especially because it was marketed so heavily as a direct adaptation. But even within the first couple of minutes of the movie, it was even our first scene of Ruthie and Krem, it becomes abundantly clear that this movie is not the comic, and it's doing the more traditional superhero movie thing of taking inspiration but more or less doing its own thing, which is normally fine and something that, like, I fully accept with the industry and I kind of enjoy most of the time. But this book was all over the movie's marketing. They gave it to me. They gave me the book at the movie. The comic is much more of a space fantasy book. It has this very mythic feel. It's more episodic and like legendary, with it being Ruthie recounting the events of the story in her book as an old woman. Events unfold from Ruthie's perspective in a sort of like pulled back, top-down view of everything, which turns Kara into this larger-than-life icon that Ruthie's trying to understand, as opposed to like a traditional protagonist. Which honestly, that's like Tom King's style, you know, that's his go-to move for everything. He loves to do this. He loves to do, and I can't confirm this, but legends say that Batman fought 1 billion dudes for 2 weeks straight, and he was so cool. Sometimes it's great, sometimes it's very weird. I've got conflicting thoughts on Tom King. You know, that's a whole other can of worms, baby. But for this story, I do think it works very well. Another change is that both Ruthie and Krem are from the same planet, and they're more like Lord of the Rings characters that get thrust into the vast world of outer space. For Krem, he treats that like a massive playground to commit as much violence as he wants. But for Ruthie, it makes her feel small and insignificant. Add on top of that Bilquis Evely's gorgeous art and Mat Lopes' colors, who he doesn't get enough credit. It's easily one of the most gorgeous comics of the past decade. And the movie does kinda none of that. And at first that was kind of disappointing to me. That moment on the bus when they say that they hit something, I got very excited because I thought that we were going to see the Carpane Dragon from the book, which is this huge, beautiful splash page, and it could have flipped the movie's visual style to be more like the comic. And so when it turned out that it was just like a regular band of space pirates, that kind of bummed me out a bit. But then because of that moment, I was sort of able to kind of lock away all of that and harden my heart, if you will. And then I started seeing the movie for what it was actually trying to be, which is more or less a completely normal, if not a little bit safe, sci-fi road trip revenge movie. It has the same characters and initial premise, Kara going on a revenge quest with Ruthie, set forth by Krypto being poisoned and retelling her origin and trauma through that lens. But honestly, that's about it. And so once I made that separation in my mind, as bummed as I was that it wasn't what I was promised with an adaptation, I was able to enjoy the movie a lot more because of that. But I'm not going to argue with people who are deeply attached to the comic that walked out of this movie frustrated. Weirdly, I think my biggest disappointment as an adaptation didn't come from like plot changes or colors or even the ending, which I'll get to, but really just lacking one specific moment. There's this scene of the comic in issue 2 that's my favorite moment from the entire story. Ruthie and Kara have been traveling together for a month and they're at a rest stop. And Kara realizes that Ruthie never learned how to wash her hands. She grew up in literally like Game of Thronesville. Like she never would have had a chance to learn that. And so Kara teaches her. She tells her step by step what to do, how much soap to use, and how long to rinse for. It's just the one page, 5 panels, where we see the dirt get washed away from this girl's hands in real time. All the while, Kara is off screen explaining it to her and connecting it to her pain of losing Krypton and losing her mother. It's an allegory for the stain of violence that Ruthie is carrying and the way that Kara is trying to wash away some of that before it becomes permanent. The book is filled with so many quiet and personal moments like this, building Kara and Ruthie's relationship, with Kara serving as this kind of motherly figure to this little girl. And while I think their dynamic in the movie is perfectly fine, especially for the 3-day time limit that they had, the movie was missing more quiet and intimate moments like this that give their relationship more texture and the breathing room to build their bond naturally. Ironically, it's what I and a lot of other people connected to the most with Superman. That quiet, intimate moment between Lois and Clark that cements the character's ideals and the entire punk rock identity of the movie. There are some great moments between Kara and Ruthie, like the recurring "don't freak out" motif, but we just didn't get the time to breathe and actually live in this relationship. So if we had a version of the hand washing scene or even something similar, I think that the emotional core of the movie would have been much stronger. There is one thing that I do think the movie actually does better than the comic, and that has to do with Krypto. I mentioned before the ticking clock for Krypto's poison, which I think adds some much needed stakes for Kara in this movie than the book does, primarily because in the comic it's revealed at the end that Krypto is completely fine the entire time and was never actually in danger. Kara says that she basically made that up as an excuse to come with Ruthie on this journey and help teach her the lesson about revenge. And I understand why it happens. In the book, the story is very much from Ruthie's perspective. It's honestly more her book than it is Kara's. And that moment turns Kara into this kind of Silver Age, like wise mentor figure where she's secretly been in control the entire time, which is definitely fun, don't get me wrong, but specifically for a Supergirl movie where she's the main focal point, I think that the driving narrative force of trying to save Krypto is just more interesting to me personally, especially with the added layer that Krypto is the physical embodiment of Krypton in Argo City. Aside from Clark in her pocket watch, he's the one last living memory of home to her. He even comes into her life on the day of her mother's funeral in the same place that the two of them would play together when she was a kid. I think it's a beautiful metaphor and personification of Kara's own memory and pain. Also, I just love the fucking guy. I'm sorry. I love dogs. Sue me. Sue me. I also think all the additions with Clark are fantastic. Obviously, David Corenswet is outstanding as Superman. We have known this forever. I love the scene where she first lands on Earth and just how confused she is, but how excited he is to finally have a member of his family that he can talk to, even if it's not the same language. I love when he gives Kara her costume, where he says it's colorful so that people know we're good, which ties into Kara's journey and her final words with her mother. But also when they're on the video call and she tells Clark that she has no people, he doesn't try to confront her or spoon feed the themes to the audience with like, but wait, I'm your people. He knows that she's still hurting and he's trying to give her the emotional space instead of forcing himself onto her life. And I refuse to believe that the worst script you've ever seen has moments like that. Also, side note, the movie really doubles down on what Gunn Superman started, with Kal-El being sent to Earth to be a conqueror, and so the message is confirmed not to be fake or altered by Brainiac or anything like that. I've had a whole year to think about this decision, and I still really don't love it, but I've honestly been able to move on from it. Luckily, it seems like the rest of Krypton was perfectly chill and normal, and Jor-El was just crazy. I think that that's going to be the running mystery throughout the first part of the DCU, what Jor-El's true intentions were when he sent his son to Earth. And hopefully we get some more answers in Man of Tomorrow. One huge departure that the movie takes from the comic, and one that I don't think is necessarily better or worse, but just fundamentally different, and that's Kara and her characterization. This version of Kara feels like someone who has not found peace. From her perspective, the death of her home and her family is only a couple of years old. She's still actively hurting and angry. We see that in pretty much everything she does, like her attitude and her language and how rough she is around the edges. But it's demonstrated best when Ruthie asks her when she stopped feeling angry, and Kara just responds with any day now. She's not better. She's not healed and ready to be a guiding hand for this little girl. She's still going through this pain actively, and now she has to help prevent Ruthie from feeling the same thing. And you compare that to the comic, where Kara still feels that pain, but a lot of that anger is kind of in her rear view. She's more mature and almost wiser, which gives her the tools to better help Ruthie. There's so many moments in the movie where Kara has to like stop herself and go like, oh shit, sorry, you're just a kid. And it's such a completely different dynamic from the comic version, and not in a way that I dislike. It's one of those changes that's just a completely different beast from the comic and forces you to view the movie in that same way. And the same applies for the movie's villain, Krem of the Yellow Hills. The movie changes Krem from a simple, violent coward into someone who is genuinely despicable. He's the leader of the brigands from the beginning, instead of joining them halfway through. In the comic, he just kills Ruthie's father in an act of senseless violence, but in the movie, it's her entire family, starting with her brother. But even more, the brigands in the comics commit atrocities and violence just kind of for the sake of it, just like for chaos and fun, while the movie reveals that the brigands steal young girls from people's homes and turn them into Krem's child wives to populate their all-male race, which is a genuinely disgusting reveal and radically changes the perspective of the source material. It's a little frustrating that such a serious subject matter was introduced and we never got really a chance to say anything with it, but I will say that that change makes Krem a lot more hateable and memorable, because in the comic, he's more or less a pretty bland character on the surface. The most interesting thing about him to me is that he's just a regular guy with swords and arrows who's thrust into the world of space. So at the very least, turning him to someone so unforgivable helps to give him more personality. But that comes at the cost of the ending, because alright, let's talk about the ending, which is easily the biggest departure from the comic. In the original comic, Ruthie is physically unable to kill Krem despite wanting to so badly. It's a great moment. She swings the sword but can't bring herself to actually kill him. Then in an act of rage, Kara tries to kill Krem, but Ruthie stops her and talks her out of it. She then sends Krem to the Phantom Zone where he's imprisoned for 300 years. We then jump forward in time to see Kara meeting with Ruthie as an old woman who's written a book about their adventures. And with the time Krem spent in the Phantom Zone, he's now reformed and changed, and genuinely feels regret for the violence of his youth. So Ruthie and Kara free Krem, who returns as an old man and begs Ruthie for her forgiveness. It's a fundamentally more hopeful message about forgiveness and that everyone, even violent men like Krem, have the capacity to change and be good, and that you can't kill your trauma and you have to carry it with you and grow and heal from it. It's made even more nuanced in that Ruthie doesn't even really forgive Krem for killing her father. She hits him with a stick and walks away, but the act of releasing him shows closure and forgiveness in and of itself. Whereas in the movie, Kara talks Ruthie out of killing Krem, and as Ruthie's walking away, Kara takes the sword and kills him herself, saying, "This is for what you did to my dog, and this is for what you did to that little girl." It's a drastically different ending compared to the comic, and arguably goes against the entire message of that original story. And fans of the comic are completely justified for rejecting it. Now, there's an argument to be made that the ending of the comic is a bit ambiguous. The final image of Ruthie hitting Krem is a wide silhouette shot ending with Krem on the ground, made even worse by the narration, Ruthie's book saying that Supergirl kills Krem. Personally, I still think it's pretty clear. If you look closely at the panels, you can see that he's still moving at the end, and that narration is Ruthie lying in her book about what happened. And Tom King has been very vocal in the past, saying that there's no ambiguity to the ending. Krem is explicitly still alive.
This is not supposed to be ambiguous. He's supposed to be alive at the end.
Okay.
That's why he grabs his head.
But I'm gonna be totally honest, on a first read through, it can be a bit confusing at first. The unreliable narration combined with the vagueness of the silhouette isn't as overly explicit as some are saying it is. If even the final panel showed Krem sitting up again, it would have been 1,000 times more clear and there wouldn't be this misunderstanding. And it seems like even Anna Nagara misinterpreted the comic's ending, saying in interviews that the book ends with Ruthie killing Krem, which is that sort of red flag that I mentioned earlier. And to me, that begs the question, why didn't anybody say anything about it? Especially when Tom King has been so heavily involved with the DCU, with this movie and also Lanterns. But taking a look at the ending of the movie on its own, separate from the comic, I do still think that there are some interesting concepts in there that work for what the movie's going for. I kind of like the idea that Kara saves Ruthie from revenge by taking that violence onto herself. Because Ruthie's soul hasn't been ruined yet, but Kara sees herself as already damaged anyway and willing to get her hands dirty and do the ugly thing. I think it lines up really well with the version of Kara that they've created here. Because she specifically hasn't been healed and is still processing her pain, she almost uses the sense of justice as an outlet for that anger, to turn that trauma and pain into something for good. The whole, we can't kill him or else we'll be just like him, or you can't kill him because revenge is bad. It's been done so much to the point where it's been like clowned on for years, so I do think it's neat that the movie went in a different direction than that. Through the course of the movie, Kara's kind of lying to Ruthie about killing Krem, in the same way that she lied to her in the book about Crypto. It's not that she thinks that Krem shouldn't die, it's that she thinks that this little girl should not be the one to do it. And I think that's very interesting. She doesn't want Ruthie to do it and risk ruining her innocence, but I think it was always her intention to kill Krem from the start and take that burden off of her. It's a much darker and honestly sadder theme to end off on compared to the more hopeful ending of the comic, but I think it unfortunately reflects the way a lot of traumatized people feel about themselves before they've been able to fully heal. Kara sees herself as already broken, already stained, and past the point of innocence. So in her mind, if someone has to carry the ugliness of killing Krem, it might as well be her. She can allow this little girl to continue being a little girl instead of the world forcing her to become a woman. I think I still prefer the original comic and the ending because I think those themes are more powerful. But with all the ways that movie Krem is different from book Krem and just just how much more evil they've made him, I don't think it would really be possible to do a redemption story for him. They explicitly made him the leader of a band of human traffickers. Let's be real, trying to redeem that in the big year 2026, that would be not a good look. A cleaner solution would have been to obviously not make Krem so despicable in the first place and kept him more in line with the more chaotic violence of the comic. This is a fictional story. They didn't have to do that to him. You know, he's not real. It seems like the ending of him dying came first and everything else was more of an attempt to make it more justified. Or honestly, I could argue if you want to say that the comic's ending is ambiguous, which I don't really agree with, but sure, then keep the ambiguity. Maybe Kara talks Ruthie out of killing Krem, or maybe she's physically unable to, like in the comic, because I just really like that moment. Then Ruthie could walk away, Kara could pick up the sword, and maybe we cut away before we actually see what happened. You could even have Lobo be more involved and potentially be the one to do it off screen. I don't think that would fully recapture the greater themes of forgiveness and hope that the book has, but at the very least, I think it would preserve the feeling of uncertainty and conflicting narration that makes the book's ending so memorable. On the whole, I'm probably like 50-50 about the ending. I think there's interesting ideas in there, but I don't think it works as well as the comic. And I think that's kind of how I feel about the whole movie, honestly. I wonder if this is going to lead into a larger arc for Kara, maybe even something like the Red Lantern Supergirl from New 52 in 2014 by Tony Bedard and Neil Ray Sinar. I just hope that this doesn't become like her thing, you know, the same way that people have treated Wonder Woman as the brutal killer for years. It's all really going to depend on how this influences the future of the character moving forward. Now, the box office for this movie hasn't been performing as well as expected, and that's led to a lot of discourse about people saying that the DCU is dead, or at least it needs to course correct right away. The box office could be a whole variety of factors, like being in between Toy Story 5 and Minions means fewer families are seeing this, or the mixed reviews means more people are going to wait till it drops on digital where they'll probably enjoy it plenty. Or hell, the cost of a movie ticket is so astronomically expensive nowadays, and we still got Odyssey and Spider-Man coming in a few weeks, that the average moviegoer just can't justify paying to see 5 movies a month when the cost of groceries is at an all-time high. Probably something like that. I've said a million times that I don't think box office equates to a movie's quality. If it did, then Suicide Squad would have won an Oscar. Oh wait, bad example. Plenty of great movies do terribly, and plenty of terrible movies do great. And the earth keeps on spinning. I think a lot of the DCU is dead talk has been very reactionary. We saw it before Superman came out, and then after Superman came out, and then when Peacemaker ended, and then when the Lanterns trailer dropped, and now again with Supergirl. The discourse has honestly become kind of exhausting. Not kind of exhausting, very exhausting. I'm exhausted. Peter Safran doesn't seem to be too concerned with this movie's performance, and it's just very weird to me that this movie, Supergirl, of all things, was for some reason considered a load-bearing movie for the entire DC Studios company. That pressure for Superman made sense, at least, because it was the first movie in the universe and the first Superman movie in like 12 years. I get why that one had to be good. Even Wonder Woman, when we eventually get that, I can understand, because I don't want them to fuck up Wonder Woman. I really don't want that. But why Supergirl? Why does Clayface have to make $1 billion to be successful? Every time I look at how people online are talking about DC, I just have this sinking feeling like, is this gonna be how it is forever? Can a movie not just be a movie anymore? Are we all just gonna be super weird about DC movies until the planet explodes and we all die from radiation poisoning? Because I think it's fair to say that a lot of people have been very weird about this movie. Whether it's targeting Milly Alcock for her looks, or harassing the singer of the middle cover, fixating on Anna Nagara's script specifically and not the direction or the editing. Variety has been especially nasty. Their review was just downright cruel, and they're reposting out of context quotes from Milly from months ago in an attempt to stir up drama and bait engagement. All of this discourse and all this vitriol for a movie that is ultimately fine, a completely inoffensive, if not a little bit bland, middle-of-the-road sci-fi movie. Where was this energy for like Quantumania or Aquaman 2 or fucking Craven, you know? I want to make this very clear. I'm not saying you specifically watching this are a misogynist or part of the problem if you didn't like the movie. Honestly, if you made it this far into the video, you are probably chill as hell. I know plenty of people who didn't like it for very justifiable reasons, especially if you're a huge fan of the comic and wanted to see it brought to life better. I don't disagree with you. I have to say this like multiple times because I know people aren't going to listen to me there. And I just think it's ironic that a movie about a character who's flawed and messy and rough around the edges, but still fundamentally good, is flawed, messy, and rough around the edges. But that's being treated like it's the worst movie ever. The core message of Supergirl is that you don't have to be nice to be kind, and you don't have to be perfect to be good. And in a world where everyone is trying to rage bait you or farm your anger for clicks, I am saying that you don't have to be good to be normal. But what did you think about Supergirl? Are you excited to see more of the character in the future? If you like this video, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe. Special thanks to Big Funkley, Hero Gen 6, Hector Magana, Landon, Nikki Balls, and Lydio53 for joining the spectacular tier of my Patreon and channel members. I kind of had like an existential crisis about making this video because like I wasn't sure if it was worth it because of the discourse, but I am glad I made it. So, you know, to be nice in the comments, I guess. This has been TroyBoy17 coming at you live. Be responsible, and I will see you around.